My name's Vincent McBurney. I've been in IT for over 20 years. For a lot of that time, I've been specialising in data integration and information governance and data quality, and trying to work out how to use this combination of people, processes and tools to be successful. I used to think it was to be successful at data integration, or then to be successful at data quality, or to be successful at MDM, but then I realised there's a unifying theme. What we're trying to be successful at is stewardship. And the stewardship kind of unifies most of our information governance topics. If we're successful at stewardship, most of those other categories of information governance will follow and fall into place. So I turned everything around last year and I said, well, I should be presenting on successful stewardship, not on anything to do with particular streams of stewardship. So this presentation is looking at our experiences with successful stewardship. So what we're doing really well as an IT industry in our books and our frameworks from places like Dharma and Mike too, is we're really good at defining what we think information governance should be. And this is a couple of examples here. It should be an approach to data governance that formalises accountability for managing information resources on behalf of others and for the best interests of the organisation. So for the last few years, I've been trying to work out why we're very good at describing it, we're no good at doing it. And that why most organisations have little footprints of information governance that aspire to this level, but the majority of the work we do doesn't even come close. And what I've come up with is, firstly, that New Zealand companies and Australian companies aren't necessarily that formal, that they don't necessarily jump on board the idea of having councils and having stewardship groups and having steward roles and wearing special cloaks and carrying a staff and that kind of thing. We're not that formal. In order to get around this informality, we need a fairly low entry point and not a high cost at bringing information governance in. And that carrying out stewardship tasks should be made as easy as possible, and that good stewardship should be rewarded to get over this inclination most people have to try and get around governance rules rather than benefit from them. And the other thing is there's a very strong DIY attitude in a lot of New Zealand companies that staff know how to get things done, and it usually involves Excel, but they know how to get things done by getting around the rules and getting around the formal processes and procedures. And there's usually a number of staff who are extremely good at DIY. Sometimes they're the superheroes who come in and save projects because they know where the data is, they know how to get to it, and they know how to move it around. So we're trying to have better information sharing. So there's no problem with being DIY, but if you've been inside some of the recent stores that sells to DIY people, they have lots of brochures and leaflets about how to do things yourself. So it's more about information sharing and learning from the experts so that everyone can be a DIY expert and not just a small number of heroes. And part of the reason why this is becoming more popular and we're doing it more and more often is that APRA is telling the financial services industry that they have to start doing this. In Prudential Practice Guide 235, Managing Data Risk, they've got a few guidelines about that they want financial services organisations to follow. There's a couple here. They want financial services to have specific roles and responsibilities: data officers, data custodians, data owners, data stewards. And then they want to make sure that they're actually doing something. So they want to have a regulated entity should have processes to ensure compliance, but most importantly, reporting mechanisms and management reviews that they're complying. So the good news for everyone outside of financial services is that they're putting in the research on how this should happen. So we've spent, for example, a couple of years at ANZ Bank working out how to apply this across over 40 projects. And that means we can go into a small organisation like a university and put in a much more streamlined set of processes using what we've learned at the large banks. So the financial services, in a way, is defining how to do these aspirational goals, but how to do it in the Australian-New Zealand culture and how to get over some of the cultural hurdles. And we're also trying to get towards this goal, not just having owners and custodians and stewards and giving people titles, but to have a very practical view of a stewardship, that somebody can understand how data or how a piece of information flows across the business. And to be a steward of information by what they call the master entity, to understand how customer data is moving between systems, and not just to understand and be an expert of data in one system, in one source system, but to have stewards and to grow the stewardship capability so that different projects who use the data downstream in warehousing and analytics, they can access a steward who can help them take that data all the way through. So we're expanding, we're not just having owners and stewards for the sake of it, we're expanding their role so that they can help a number of projects use and understand data more effectively. And we're also trying to make anyone a steward. So because we're kind of informal organisations and we don't necessarily have the funding or the ability to hire a team of stewards or to have 100 stewards on standby, one for every project, we're looking at everyone being able to hop on and off the stewardship bus in some way, whether they're an IT person who loads data or a sales rep who talks to the customers. What we find is that the sales reps or the customer-facing staff are often the ones who can fix data quality problems, for example, because they can talk to the customer or they know the customer, they know their addresses, they know their phone numbers. As long as they're not an organisation where the sales staff are trying to keep customer details to themselves and don't want you to clean up their customer data because that affects their commissions, you can bring anyone on board this stewardship program and they can, whether they're full-time loading data or whether a steward manager or a business analyst, anyone should be able to hop on and off. And sometimes stewardship is just a role you fulfill for 1 hour a week or a couple of hours a month, or sometimes it's your full-time role. We want the processes to be the same and to support both types of stewards. So getting started with stewardship. We get started with stewardship, we have our aspirational goals that we want better data quality, reduce application development costs, increase productivity and reduce compliance costs. But we also know that there's a bit of perspiration to get there, and this is our challenge when we're implementing tools and processes. How do we make the perspiration side easier, such as getting time off the subject matter experts, handling installation and training costs of getting governors going, and defining extra role for projects. So those tend to be the blockers for information governance and why we can't suddenly rush it across a number of projects. And our way to overcome that is very much results and benefits orientated. So the organisation has to recognise at some point that moving across to consistent governance across projects is going to save them a huge amount of money along the track. And an example is in a data warehouse. A data warehouse without some of the guidelines we have on information governance will tend to be decommissioned in about 5 years' time as people start to realise they can't enhance the reports, that the people who built it originally are gone, the documentation is stale or missing, and it's too hard to make changes to the warehouse code. Everyone's too scared to touch it because it's a combination of coding different products. And then when the business comes and asks for a couple of columns to be added that has to flow through the warehouse, they're told it's going to cost about $60,000 because we have to change code in 4 places in 3 coding languages. Whereas if they added those columns in an Excel spreadsheet, they could do it themselves in a couple of hours. So what happens is if we don't follow these processes, a lot of our information assets, probably 50%, are written off within 5 years. So a large amount of the IT money you spend today is written off within 5 years' time because you can't support it and maintain it. You don't have stewardship and governance over it. So at some point we have to recognise that these expenses in the short term have to be added to projects to get them up and running on information governance, or 50% of what they're building is going to be written off within 5 years. And we start with information as an asset. So I'm going to talk about the business glossary here. I'm going to have screenshots of the ones we've built and the IBM tools, but there's actually quite a lot of them available. It's becoming a very common piece of software is to have an enterprise glossary, and there's lots of different options to choose from. But the enterprise business glossary is essentially the start of information as an asset, because what it brings into a single repository and it gets everyone to share is a common set of terms and definitions and a common catalogue of information assets. And if you don't have a list of subject areas and business terms and stewards linked to them, then you can't track your progress on information as an asset. You can't track your progress on ownership and stewardship and governance because you don't know who is responsible for what. So we always start our information governance journeys by setting up a glossary, and without a glossary we have no metrics, we have no reporting, so we have no governance program to put our name behind within, further down the track. So the business glossary is there to create a taxonomy of how you want to organise your information concepts. So a taxonomy of folder structure, whether you want to organise your information by subject areas or by business units and then subject areas. There was one major bank who decided there would be 12 subject areas across the bank, across all projects. And then there was another major bank we worked with who said, we'll start with a tree of business units and they can have their own subject areas. And then under that we have terms and definitions such as customer, customer status, customer active count. Something as very simple as how many customers do we have can have a number of definitions in an organisation or a number of disagreements, because whether you count a customer who isn't paying their bills or is just cancelled or has only just signed on, or is an old customer and is not necessarily got any services anymore, everything is up for debate. So the glossary serves the role of defining what information is important, how we define that information, how we share those definitions, and then we can attach stewards to it and start to introduce this stewardship and ownership model. Stewards and owners of information concepts, and then of the information assets such as reports, databases, and applications. When I was at NBN, I noticed this, the way that we pay for definitions over and over and over again. So everybody is writing definitions into project documentation. At NBN they have a definition of a point of interconnect in a couple of different places on their website, and a slightly different definition each time. And this is essentially a money drain on your projects. Everyone's being asked to write definitions all the time in their technical documentation, their business documentation, or in their emails over and over again. And these definitions are not always agreeing. And a lot of people aren't necessarily that good at writing definitions. You can onboard yourself onto a new IT project, read the detailed design documents, and then still not understand what's going on. So one of the things the business glossary solves is, let's move to one version of a definition and let's have it well approved and looked after. Let's get some input from, say, technical writers or business writers, and make sure that we're getting a good set of definitions that everyone can use in their technical documentation, their business documentation, or their emails, or in this case, NBN website. Another thing we're looking at, this is an example from universities. What we're finding is universities all have this concept of equivalent full-time student load, which is called EFSL, which is how much teaching a university does in a given semester. And FTE is the equivalent in HR, full-time equivalent. But the problem is different parts of universities have different definitions of EFSL. In the planning area, EFSL is planned EFSL. It's what they plan to teach next year. In the finance area, it's actual EFSL. It's the money being paid by the students for what they've been taught or what they've learned. And there's all these different flavours and different varieties. So we have to open the glossary up, not just to business terms and definitions, but to this area of synonyms and related terms, so that you can track the variances in terms and the different definitions in terms, different definitions across business units. And so that people can explore terms and see different varieties of terms and understand what they're looking at in a report or what they're talking about in a meeting, and how different business units have different perspectives of these terms. And then we drill through into information governance from the business terms, and from the stewards, we drill into whatever area of information governance we think is important, and the part of the business glossary, which is the policy and rules tree. So part of the problem with information governance policies and rules is your policies are defined in PDF documents that are about 50 to 100 pages long. There's probably almost 10 of them. There's usually a security policy, a data classification policy, a data quality policy, all these policies. So when somebody comes in to actually do a task, you say they're a contractor, they're only there for a couple of days, they don't have time to read 10 policy documents, 600 pages of policies to work out how to do their task. And you can't memorise the policy. So what we're doing in the glossary is we're taking a policy and a rule like protecting cardholder data, and then we're linking that to business terms like the personal access number or the credit card account. And when somebody has a task to do, like they have to do some, they have to take credit card numbers and put them in a report, they can look up credit card number and then they can see all the rules attached to that, and they can read those rules that are specific to their task, like to de-identify the numbers or mask the numbers, or secondary use of numbers where they've been collected for a primary use. So the glossary policies and rules layer is there to create a very understandable business language description of rules that you want people to follow. They then get linked to terms and definitions directly, so that you can open up a rule when you need it. And instead of reading a 60-page document, you're reading a single rule. Your document's broken into dozens of rules, and the rules are linked to the business information. And the rules can be linked to information assets like tables and columns and schemas and databases as well. So we can start to add that layer of rules on top of our concepts and our information assets. And this is an example of a data quality rule. And in this data quality rule, customer email address is in a valid format. So in our glossary, we first define what we want the rule to achieve at a very plain language description. And then we describe the severity and the impact of this rule. And we try and describe why this rule is important within the glossary. And we're not even caring about technology at this point. We don't care if the rule's being written in SQL or ETL or where it's being written. We're just trying to get the business to own the rule and to define why the rule is important. And that, the other thing we're doing is we're looking at transformation rules and rules about how data gets changed and transformed. So the challenge we're finding is in financial services, everyone wants this data lineage to be delivered with their data warehouse and analytics. And data lineage is the ability to take data that flows through source systems through various layers of warehousing and reporting and out the other end into a report that someone sees on their screen. And the objective and what we first asked for whenever asked to deliver data lineage is to track columns all the way through these processes. And the lineage would typically, you don't need to be able to read this, but it's an example lineage diagram. The lineage would typically go through a number of jobs, a number of tables, a number of files, and it'll pop out the other end. So we come up with this lineage, and the first feedback we get is that's not what we want to see. That's too complex. And we typically get this feedback, especially from upper management level, project managers, executives, or sometimes business analysts on projects. Once we've done the hard work and actually got the lineage showing, they say that's diagram's too hard to follow. So what we think that the success factor to lineage isn't necessarily how data moves through at a column level, it's what happens to the data, what are the filters and the transformation rules that are happening to that data. We think that's the big winner of a business glossary, especially in data warehousing and reporting, is to record what the rules were that transform the data on the way through. So we know as an IT function we can deliver lineage. Now we have the right tooling, so lineage can be imported and parsed and stitched and displayed. But what we want from our information governance program is to make the rules behind the lineage more transparent. An example of that F saw earlier is that we've worked with a few universities. I went to a few university websites to find out how they calculate EFSL internally. When they report EFSL to the government, it all means the same thing. It's all on the same scale. But internally, on their different student management systems, they all have different rules about how they calculate EFSL. The simplest one, University of Melbourne, is 100 credit points, represents a standard annual full-time EFSL. But Macquarie has probably the most complex one. To calculate EFSL, divide the unit value of units by 22.667. So this is the transparent rules that we want to deliver with in our business glossary and information governance program. This is one of the reasons why your information assets get written off within 5 years. People forget what these rules are or how they were coded. If I was a developer coming in and trying to fix that algorithm and I didn't understand where 22.667 came from, I would be very uncertain about changing that code, and potentially a set of reports would be hard to maintain because we wouldn't as a developer, I wouldn't understand the rule, or as a business user reading a report, I wouldn't understand where the numbers came from and how these sort of calculations were run. So we think that, in my experience and feedback we're getting when we're working with a lot of financial services is this area of rules and bringing that into your business glossary is one of the highest value things you can do. And one of the best pieces of information to share is the secret behind the rules behind your data. And this is something we got out of, we were recently doing some work with ANZ Bank. This is something we pulled out of our business glossary after we'd done a pilot and after we onboarded some projects. And this was actually something we could throw together very quickly, very easily. It's the beginning, it's piloting our first governance reports. So we know that the that in order to be sure information governance is being rolled out across projects and people are adopting it, we need metrics and we need reports, and managers need to see the progress. So what we could pull out of a glossary, once we put information assets in a database, and once we put owners against those assets in the database, we have metrics, we have reports. So this one tracked how well a number of projects were onboarding themselves into the business glossary, which is the count of published business terms. So we had a list of projects, a FATCA project, an APS 910 project, a HR reporting project, and then we could track how many business terms are adding. And we could track, of those business terms, how many were linked to data warehouse assets like tables and columns and reports. And we could track how many business terms we were getting across business units, Australia Division, ANZ Enterprise, Global Environment, etc. So this was very easy to extract and report on once we've got an information governance catalog, once we're collecting, once we're tracking who should own what. So this is essentially APRA CPG 235 compliance delivered in the last 12 months at ANZ Bank, which is we started with the business glossary, we added terms and definitions, then we started to link those to data warehouse assets, tables and columns, and then we published a report. So what seemed to be hard previously, it was previously very hard in the bank to assign owners to anything and track that ownership model, started to become very easy once everybody was onboarded, taught how to use a glossary and explain the benefits of the glossary to themselves and the bank. This whole path towards best practice in information governance started to become a lot easier. And this is what the executives and the managers look at. How well is each project doing at following our governance rules? And we want to take these ideas and use them in this area of big data. So some trends that we're seeing and something we've done in a couple of organisations is flip data warehousing around on its head. Data warehousing's become a little bit disappointing in that the cost and the time to onboard a new report has become too long. So some companies report that it costs as much as $200,000 and 12 to 6 months to get a couple of new reports added to a warehouse, or to bring a new source into a warehouse. And they're seeking a magic bullet, and they're hoping a big data platform is a magic bullet. A big data platform is where you can put data in to a shared database or a big data area, Hadoop, and you can start using the data before you've governed it. So part of your data warehouse cost is what's called governing to perfection. It's designing and modeling everything before you bring the data in. So it's spending time building your data models, your detailed requirements, your data flows, your reporting schemas, and designing what your report should look like, and then building it. And so it's spending like up to 3 months governing it before the user can actually see a report. What they want to do with big data is flip it around so you can see a report, you can see data in an analytical model before you've done any modelling or governance or data quality or cleaning or anything like that. So big data is offering a silver bullet, but it's also offering what could potentially become what they call the data swamp, a big mess. If you're letting everyone throw data into a database, that's going to become a huge mess over time. So what we see as governing appropriately is that the business glossary can label what goes into the big data store and is kept. So what we are advising is that you treat your big data platform like you treat the fridge in your kitchen. If something's not labelled in the fridge, after a couple of weeks, when it changes, when it's reached its second colour, you throw it out, right? So big data can be the same. You can open the floodgates and let people load data that they think is interesting. That can be internal data, external data. They might add in PDFs, Word documents. They can add that in, but they can try out hypotheses. They can see if it's valuable. But within 6 months, you can throw those assets out if they haven't labelled them in the glossary, given them a steward, given them an owner, and documented the rules. So if they've come up with some interesting analytics out of that data, they need to document the rules, or you can't trust the analytics. You can't trust the reports they're producing from it. So we see these information governance building blocks as being appropriate for governing to perfection, but also appropriate for governing at the big data or late arriving governance on big data assets. I think the same techniques work in both areas, and if you don't bring it into this area, your assets are eventually going to be written off because they'll become too expensive to maintain. And if you don't bring it into this area, those assets will eventually become completely unknown. You won't know what they are or how they got there at all. So I'm going to look at drilling into data quality now to give you a walkthrough of a successful stewardship pathway. So we used to think data quality was very much an IT-driven function about finding data quality problems and fixing them. And this is an example we did of finding data quality problems using a data profiling tool where we get a list of columns and we find, using profiling, we find errors in those columns. So we find columns with nulls in them, we find weird-looking dates and weird-looking characters, and we pump out a list of, say, 100 data quality problems we found across 50 tables. And we've become very good with the technology at finding problems, and whether it's overlap problems between systems or problems with data inside of systems, we have profiling tools now which find problems more effectively and much more quickly than ever. Our issue then became, what do we do with these problems? How do we come up with a plan? If we find 100 data quality problems, what's the plan on what we do with those problems? So whenever I go into an organisation and ask them about data quality, somebody at the first meeting pulls out a spreadsheet, and in that spreadsheet they have somewhere between 50 to 150 data quality rules. And they look something like this. And I don't think I've ever found an organisation that doesn't have a spreadsheet full of data quality rules that somebody runs somewhere. So the issue with the data quality rules is the same as the issue with the profiling results. There's lots of rules, there's over 100 rules. We don't know necessarily why some of these rules are running. We don't know which ones are more important than others, and we don't know who cares about these rules in the organisation on the business side. So what our challenge has been is to take the data quality problems and the very technical description of them, to give them a severity or a priority, and then to describe the business impact. So this is our attempt at adding business impact to data quality rules and explaining what's going to happen if we ignore that rule or if we don't fix that data. And this is an example of attaching, I've taken this out of a book by Sunil Suarez, but this is an example of how he attached a cost to a data quality rule. In this case, it was date of birth being missing. What was the cost of not having date of birth for a certain percentage of customers in the customer database? How can we calculate that cost and come up with a dollar value? And therefore, how can we justify cleaning up dates of birth or spending money and contacting customers and getting them to update their dates of birth? And his calculation included the loss of the ability to sell products to them where you needed to know their date of birth, or offering products to customers who are under the age of 18, and those offers were just a waste of money and time. Another example comes from the Data Crunch report. This comes out every year. It looks at data quality across pharmaceutical suppliers of pharmaceutical products to the supply chain. And what they do, they very effectively present data quality problems as bundles of money and bundles of cash. So this is effectively the ultimate way to show a data quality problem. Come into a meeting with a large bundle of money and with a dollar sign on it and say, here's your data quality problem, bang, right there. So what they've done is they've taken these very technical problems like vendor item code, formats being wrong, characters and dots and dashes being used, and they've put a dollar value on it, and they said the potential cost of manual checking of the unit of measure is costing the industry $8.8 million a year. So the fact that they don't validate unit of measure and that it's sometimes treated very ad hoc and sometimes junk data is put in there is costing over $8 million across pharmaceutical companies each year. And then the cost of urgent deliveries due to undersupply is costing over $4 million. So this is what we want to get to. We want to explain data quality in impact and cost, not in technical rules, and not in data quality theory, not like the theory that you've got to have a completeness and you've got to have accuracy. We want to describe it in terms of the impact and cost. And so this leads us to what we rolled out very successfully at QSuper is the data quality scorecard. So it's taking data, we saw data governance metrics earlier for business terms. Now we've added a branch of data quality rules. We've got data quality metrics now for data quality. So in this particular example, we have we're looking at data quality metrics across the whole organisation, across every policy and rule, and we've summarised it at an organisation level. How many policies are being passed, how many rules are being passed across the whole organisation. What's the business impact, $12 million. What's the cost to fix, $6 million. And what we find, we're looking for a graph with this sort of load, in that most of the data quality problems are in the medium to low category, and that's why they're still there, and that's why we haven't cleaned them up yet. But there's $100,000 worth in the critical bucket, and where a steward would log in and see that and click on that and open that up and start investigating that straight away. And then we can look at the data quality problems by subject area, or we can look at the data quality problems by business unit sometimes, or then we can pick a different policy and drill into data quality by policy. So when we get the spreadsheet of rules, let's say 100 data quality rules, what we try and do is work out the priorities, but then we try and group rules against the policy. So if we've got 5 rules about customer contact details, we want a policy that says a customer, we must be able to send a customer their annual statement. That can be our data quality policy. That's a very typical one in superannuation. If you can't send them their annual statement, and if you will have 2 policies, one is we have to be able to send the customer their annual statement, and the other policy is the annual statement should be accurate. And that then tells us what rules we need. We need the rules about their address, their name, their salutation. They need to be populated, they need to be accurate. We need rules that reconcile the superannuation balances, the account balance. We probably need to reconcile that against 2 locations. Super funds spend a lot of time reconciling your account statements before they go out. They can spend a couple months reconciling all the numbers before they send you the letter, because they can get fined if they send you in an inaccurate letter. And if they lose track of you, if they lose track of your the ability to contact you, they lose you as a customer. They have to roll your fund over to the government. So they've got a very strict rules. So it's very important that they track a couple of high-level policies, and then they define the rules under that. So the management would look at the policy level. They would look at what are our metrics on contacting the customers and being able to send the customer statements out. And then the stewards could drill right down to the rule level about how many address 1 fields are missing and how many suburbs are invalid and how many postcodes don't match the suburb. And then we have the business process that goes behind this. And the business process is, what do we do about those data quality problems? So a very simple business process is that we have the exceptions that come out of our data quality metrics. We pump out exceptions out of the scorecarding process. Stewards open up exceptions, and they can either repair the data, or they can submit a change request for someone else to repair the data. Or they can submit a change request for a system to be fixed, or they can pass the responsibility on to someone else. But what we need to do is to give the steward the ability to move the issue forward and not for it to be ignored. Because that spreadsheet of 100 data quality rules, most of those rules are being ignored when they fail, because it goes into a kind of a black hole. So in order to empower stewards to have more successful stewardship, we need them to be able to, manage a team of stewards. So this is an example of a stewardship console, but we need, as a manager of stewards, we need to be able to see who our stewards are and what data quality issues or what governance issues they're investigating, how many have come in each day, how many have been opened, how many have been closed. We need to know how we're doing at actually drilling into the issues of data governance that come out of our data quality metrics or come out of our business glossary. So this example has a list of stewards, and the graph is showing us, I think the green ones are completed tasks and the blue ones are new tasks. And we can see which of our data quality issues we've completed. This one, the particular one, was attached from the MDM project, how many are completed by priority and by status. But as a steward, we're giving them an inbox. So a steward needs to know what to do. And remember, stewards might be somebody who hops on and off a stewardship role. They might have another job to do. For most of the time, they might only be a steward for a couple of hours a week. So they can hop into their stewardship inbox and they can see this particular person could be a steward across the data warehouse, MDM and reference data management checks. So this person could be what we call that enterprise subject area steward. They look after customer data across a number of systems, and they look after it across a number of capabilities. So in their inbox, they'll have some MDM specific tasks, which is duplicate customers. They'll have some data warehouse specific tasks, which is some data that couldn't be loaded to the warehouse because it was unusable. And they'll have some reference data exceptions where we have an invalid project code or invalid state code. So we want to make it easy for them to work out what they should do, what they look after, and what tasks they have to do that particular day. And then we want to give them a process for solving problems. So this particular business process is behind their task. They open up the task, they jump into the business process. They can take an exception, they can recommend a fix, and then that fix can be applied by the data source owner, by a support team. So sometimes your data steward will be, I think at QSuper, the superannuation support team with the stewards, they could log into the superannuation core system and fix problems directly. Sometimes your stewards would recommend a fix and it would go to a support team, a data entry person who would make that change for them. Or sometimes your problem can't be fixed and you would log it, it would go to the Governance Council to be discussed and argued, and they would come up with a resolution. So we can't have a data quality problem sitting with a steward and not going anywhere. We can't always have a steward who can fix the problem themselves. They have to be able to pass it on to somebody else. And we have to have an escalation route for a steward to send a problem up the chain to management or change management or data governance for those problems that can't be easily fixed. So data quality success factors focus on data quality issues that have a real impact, or try and explain the impact of those issues. Make it easy to collect data quality metrics. Make it easy to be a steward across different facets of data quality. So we're making stewardship easier by giving them governance reports and giving them business processes to follow. Put in a combination of people, processes and tools that let you tackle quality in a consistent way. So we had a consistent way of tackling data quality across master data, reference data and reporting. Make your stewards more useful and make your non-stewards better stewards. So I'm going to jump into another scenario around master data management. So master data management is where we get into the area where you almost have to be information governance elite, where you're suddenly dealing with data quality problems and data synchronization problems across systems and data that doesn't agree with each other across systems and different viewpoints of data, and trying to get us to a single version of the truth on customer data or product data. So we have to be able to take these information governance learnings and be able to apply them in an MDM project so that we can do advanced things like mastering data. So we always start MDM the same way we start stewardship, in the same way we start quality. Where's the value? Why are we doing this? And we usually, this is a fairly common slide for me, on customer master data management. We've got 3 or 4 projects underway in Sydney at the moment on this particular topic. What are we doing? Why are we here? What's master data trying to achieve? We don't want master data to be an architecture and plumbing project, because you'll see $10 million disappear and you won't know where it was spent. You'll just have better plumbing. We want master data to have business outcomes for business users, such as improving marketing productivity. Here's an example of a master data management failure, which was on Fox News. I think it came out last year. A letter sent to a customer with the address of daughter killed in car crash or current business. So one of the issues of master data management is there's many different variations of customer data across many systems. If you use the wrong one, you get a brand reputation like this problem, or you send it to the wrong person, or you use the wrong address, or you fail to understand the value of the customer and you lose customers who are quite valuable. So we're trying to avoid things like this. Most of our customer master data management projects are actually being funded by the marketing team because they don't want this to happen at the moment. This was News Corp. They presented an IBM event last year. We did a project with them. We spent about 6 months putting in their MDM, their first ever MDM project, which involved linking of customer accounts, fuzzy matching and deduplication, customer and householding. Then they came to an IBM event. They presented these findings a few months after the project had finished. They said that they were getting more newsletter clicks, that they were getting strong ad revenue growth without reducing revenue prices, ad prices. They reduced churn by 20%, and they were using what they call lookalike acquisition model. So what they can do is they can find a valuable customer, and then they can find other customers that have a lookalike, that have a similar profile, who are not spending as much with them, and they can make offers to them and they can turn them into valuable customers. So they were quite pleased that their MDM wasn't simply replacing the plumbing. We actually had increased engagement with customers, increased revenue, decreased risk, and less gut feel on who a good customer was or who a bad customer was. And they achieved this in part by doing better customer householding. So they had customers who had different publications and different newspaper subscriptions, and of course in the brave new world, a lot of their customers are online, and they fill out their own data entry forms, and they have very incomplete information about them. So they found that by bringing the customer data across when you sign up for a magazine and a newspaper and a digital media, if you bring all those records together and then you find out there's somebody else in your household also buying, you can make better offers to that household. And then the organisation relationship to their advertising revenue buyers, it helped to know if you're dealing with a company who is a subsidiary of another company or a branch of a company, and that you can make offers to other branches. It helped to know the relationships within companies and who the buyers were within companies. So these are the business benefits of MDM that you would offer and that you would target to make some money back out of your MDM investments. And these are things that are extremely difficult to do without MDM. If you don't have MDM technology, things like customer householding is extremely manual and time intensive. And things like deduplicating a customers is also quite time consuming and intensive. ANZ Bank had a similar story. They presented an IBM event last year. They had a customer by account view, and they wanted a single view of customer across a number of countries. And I noticed when I flew in this morning, Westpac sent me a text message to tell me I could withdraw money from Westpac ATMs. So their customer, single view of customer, they can tell that I've moved from Australia to New Zealand, and I had to look around to see if I was being followed by a Westpac car. But I've got the Westpac app on my phone, so they're kind of nicely spying on me. Like, the app is good, I can withdraw cash from using my phone. I can go to an ATM and withdraw cash. So I kind of don't mind that the Westpac app is on my phone because it lets me withdraw cash when I don't have a card. But I kind of didn't realise how much they were spying on me until they sent me a text message to tell me welcome to New Zealand. And I'll probably get a message later this morning asking how I enjoyed my breakfast and whether the eggs were overcooked, because that's what they've, you know. But they wanted this for ANZ Bank. They wanted you to open an account in Australia, and then when you move to New Zealand, because the lifestyles, of course, much better, you can just go into a branch and reopen your account and your customer details will come across. So they negotiated with 32 regulators across 32 countries, and everyone agreed that they could do this, except for, I think it was Indonesia. And so they've got a single master across those countries. And they did it by doing something like this. Most of our customer MDM is actually a dynamite for finding data quality problems, because what we do with MDM is we get all of these customer records from different systems and different eras in that customer's life. So when the customer first opened a bank account over in Perth, to when they became a doctor, they graduated from university, got married, changed their name. We've got all these customer records from different eras and from different products and from different systems. When we bring it together and create what we call the best guess, the composite view, we suddenly have 6 data quality problems that a steward can investigate. 6 systems where potentially the customer contact details are wrong. And some of those systems, it's not going to matter, it's going to be really old data, but sometimes we might be sending a credit card statement to the wrong address, or we might be sending email offers to the wrong email account. So this ability to link and fuzzy match and create the best guess gives you a kind of a data quality superfood. It gives you this ability to look at your customer details across a number of systems and see where the gaps and problems are. And what ANZ Bank found, and what we found at several of our Sydney customers, is if we tried to synchronise this data across these 6 systems as our first MDM project, it would cost probably more than $10 million, because what we're doing is we're writing complex interfaces into core banking systems. And these systems are very touchy and they have very specific inputs, and they don't like it when you hack the data at the database level, and they don't make it easy to merge records. Some of them don't even let you merge records. A particular bank in Sydney, Siebel, only lets you create customers at an account level, and every account is a new customer record. You can't deduplicate your customers. You're physically prevented from deduplicating your customers. So MDM plumbing, which is automatically fixing these problems, is often unachievable or prohibitively expensive. Stewardship, however, isn't as expensive. So what ANZ Bank found, and what a few of our customers are finding, is if they had a team of stewards, if they had an offshore team of stewards or a couple of stewards, or at Q Super, if the stewards come from their current superannuation support team, they can fix these problems much more quickly and easily than technology. They can do it using those business flows, which is to submit a change request or to go in and fix it directly in the core banking system. they can fix the data quality in the front end screens just by ringing the customer and getting their latest address and updating it. And that's why when you get contacted by organisations these days, when you're on the phone, they'll ask you, is this still your right address, or is this your right phone number, or is this your right email address? Often when you ring up your telco or your bank to argue about a bill, they'll interrupt you and ask you about your data quality during the phone call, because it's simpler to get a steward to keep this up to date. Technology can make a best guess of what it should be, but we can't write it back because we could break those systems, or those systems don't let us. So stewards are the secret sauce. They're the ones who can receive this in their inbox and then decide that they're going to fix it in those two systems, and they'll do it, and it'll only take them a couple of minutes, and that customer will be fixed. And the next time it comes through, that address will come from those sources instead of, you won't get 6 different addresses, you only get 1 coming through. Or a steward will eyeball it in this system and say, no, we have to keep that address because that's a regulatory requirement, that's the address they've notified us of, and we're not allowed to change it. So that's where stewardship is where stewardship is making MDM successful. It's saving us millions of dollars on expensive interfaces. MDM is finding the data quality problems, stewards are fixing it. And so what ANZ Bank found, and what some other financial services have found, is that stewards are making MDM a value for money. That's where the value for money is coming from. The technology is we can get to this view very quickly, but writing it back is where a lot of the expense of MDM comes from. So most of our MDM projects involve taking this best guess and writing it to analytics and reporting, where they can use it and it's not going to cause any too much damage. They can use it in their marketing and they can use their reporting analytics. But when it comes to fixing it at source, that's where our stewards come in. We need our stewards to reliably and safely fix it at source, especially if you're a super fund and you have to get the name and address right. It's safer for a steward to actually call the customer and fix it with the customer on the phone than it is to get a piece of technology to write an address back without anybody checking it first. And this is an example where ANZ Bank, they built their own user interface on top of MDM technology, but they wanted the ability to link companies together and say these are the same group of companies, or these companies are related. And so they wanted to be able to turn a list of companies into one entity. And then they started to add the business value on top of those entities. They wanted a know your customer check, and they wanted this view here, which was customer profitability. Once they've let stewards group a list of companies together by looking at the companies, looking at their names, looking at their addresses, and then clicking and saying, yes, these are the same, then suddenly we have a view of customer profitability by customer they'd never seen before, which is just another tab on their MDM user interface. So we're looking for business value, not just to do MDM for the sake of MDM, but what is the business value out of it? What are we giving the business users? What's the benefit of doing this? In this particular case, a never before seen view of customer profitability for groups of companies. And everything is easy. So this is a user interface where a steward logs in, they click on tabs and here they just, they can actually expand and click on a company and see the company on a map, and they can say yes, link or unlink. It's extremely easy to use because we're trying to make stewardship have a very low entry point. And their experiences were they thought they would have to spend $50 million synchronising this master data across all the core banking systems. They discovered or that it would cost $5 million to create a complete golden customer record that they could write back. What they discovered was they only needed a couple of data stewards who could go and manually fix the incorrect addresses when they popped up. So they've actually expanded to more steward teams doing more tasks now, but essentially stewardship was a lot cheaper than writing data back and synchronising data across those applications for customer data. I mean, you're still synchronising your transaction data because you have to, you're synchronising your account data because you have to, but there are certain things that stewards can synchronise a lot more easily than technology can. And this is making, this is another example of making stewardship easy. This is comparing the two records and choosing to link or unlink the customer. So this is the type of technology we want to roll out. We don't want to roll out, we don't want to show that we're rolling out MDM technology and have large infrastructure diagrams. We want to show we're rolling out a stewardship form where a steward can link or unlink a customer. So the MDM technology says these are probably the same customer, and the steward gets to link or unlink them, and the technology will remember that choice next time around. It won't keep putting that into the steward's inbox. So some of the examples we've had, I think one particular customer, we processed 16.4 million customer records, found 2.7 million duplicates, 8 million households. So MDM technology is needed to handle the raw numbers of data. And another customer, we did a 2-day proof of concept. They found in their legacy matching process 561 duplicates. We found 3,318 that we thought could be automatically linked. Another 5,000 the stewards should investigate. So again, the technology is finding a pipeline of data quality issues that we've never seen before. We're finding over 3,000 data quality issues we think we could almost fix straight away because it's such a tight and close match. And another 5,000 the stewards can investigate for duplicate customer records or inaccurate customer records or incomplete customer records. So MDM is going to pump out this large outlet of data quality issues. You need a stewardship team or stewardship processes in place, or you're not going to be able to handle it, and your MDM won't give you the value it's supposed to give you. You won't be fixing your data back at source if you don't have the stewardship in place to go with your MDM projects. So this is kind of the ultimate of the stewardship journey, that we started by just doing something really basic, defining terms and concepts and giving them owners. We moved to something slightly more complex, adding some data quality rules. And now we've moved to probably the most complex, which is mastering data across applications. And we're reaching that model where a steward is a master data entity steward. And they're looking at data quality problems of their master data coming out of different systems into their inbox. And they're helping to fix and resolve those problems across a number of systems. So that's kind of where we want to get to MDM. Most of our MDM projects are customer driven, 360-degree view, but we're also doing a lot more reference data management. I was on a project recently where project codes were a bit of a mess. We discovered that in the source application, you could export a project, delete it, import it again, and it gets a new identifier and the same name, the same description, and it wrecked the warehouse. So reference data is becoming increasingly recognised as being a mess as well. So we're getting a lot of demand to do custom master data management because that's kind of sexy. That's where a lot of the money is coming in. But we're getting more so demand to get the reference data right to stop the hemorrhaging of money from projects dealing with reference data accidents. And I think we'll have some time for questions and answers. I think I'm, at the end of the presentation. So I'd like to open up if anyone's got some questions about anything you've seen, far away. Martin, yes.
Firstly, every time I listen to you, something else impacts my brain, so thank you for that. You're bending my mind. The business is not static, right? So we talked about setting up governance and being able to track and surface risks and priorities and costs of data quality issues and the benefits of fixing it. How do we surface that? How do we make it easy for the stewards and for managers and stakeholders to understand the relationship between the current rules, the current requirements, and so can we do scenarios, or what are you finding in terms of outlets for variability in business?
Yeah, well, the critical success factor is that your glossary has to be active, an active hub. So one example is if a steward leaves or a person leaves a role, that everything they're responsible for moves to another user. Another one is that you can actually have a governance report on how old your definitions are getting, how old your rules are getting, and that if a rule hasn't been changed in 12 months, take it to the governance group and get it reviewed so that rules are kept up to date. So when your business processes change, your glossary rules should change with it. And then if there's a change request, hopefully most changes to systems and changes to reports will have a change request attached. Part of the change request should be, what are we doing to fix the glossary as part of this change request process? So
For the stewards.
For the steward, yeah. So how is the steward involved in the change request? How are we doing impact analysis of this change request? And then how are we updating the information assets, the terms and definitions and the rules so that that business change or that application change or that report change or that data change is reflected in the glossary where we share the information about that change or about that.
And is that what organisations are doing, or is this still quite fresh? They're getting through the first hurdle, everyone goes, phew.
Yeah, so I'd say that we tend to get a glossary up and running in about 3 weeks, but it takes 12 months before I would say it's fully active.
Right.
So I think Bank of New Zealand, we put the glossary in, and I only spent about a week with them. I spent a couple of weeks swapping emails and sending them the guides. I spent a week with them to get the first glossary in, and then it's been about 6 months, and they've got 12 stewards, and they're actually presenting at events in Australia now about their information governance program and being successful. But it took 6 months before it was active, where 12 stewards were actively owning and looking after content. And the feedback I've had from places who have spent 6 months plus with the glossary, like QSuper and Bank of New Zealand, is try and find one owner for a concept or one owner for a term, and just be successful with that. Just be successful at having one person to go to for help with a reporting field or a table or a column or what. If you get one owner to be responsible, that's your governance program can be driven away from that. That's something you can maintain and look after. But yeah, essentially it takes time, and then it takes, and as I said, it took the governance scorecards to make sure projects were putting the time in and getting to the point where the glossary was active. And if it's not active, it can't be trusted. If it's active and it's being constantly updated, it can be trusted. And the problem with a lot of the wikis and the problem with the SharePoint documents is they're not active. You can't trust them because they're 6 months old, 6 months or longer in age. They're probably not up to date. They're probably not reflecting what's really in production anymore.
Okay.
So it's all about keeping it active.
Good.
Vincent, I've got a question. So we talked about the fact that this isn't starting with a conversation about technology, it's starting with business and business benefits and outcomes.
Yes.
So therefore, when you're getting sponsorship within organisations, one of the conflicts is, what an organisation has so much on their plate, where are they going to get budget and where are they going to prioritise this stuff?
Yeah.
Who do you find that we're getting to talk to the most about that's the standing up and being the sponsor?
Well,
is it at an exec level?
Yeah, well, we have to have some executive appetite. And with master data management, it's coming from the marketing budgets, and it's coming from getting more value out of customers or understanding customers better. For straight out information governance, setting up a glossary is usually coming from the risk, financial risk, or in universities it often comes from the data warehouse and business intelligence and planning units. This is really great support for anything to do with warehousing, reporting, and analytics. So probably the executives who look after reporting analytics, or the executives who look after risk. Data quality, we've tried for years to get data quality across the line on value for money, but what I'm hearing is that everyone's more interested in risk rather than value. Let's shut off the risk of data quality first, which is the risk of brand reputation loss, or the risk of upsetting a customer or losing a customer seems to be an even higher priority. A way to get going with the data quality framework is tackling data risk. Any other questions? How did we go on time? Okay, good. Well, thanks for coming along, and I'll be here afterwards, so if you want to come up and ask some questions. But appreciate the really good turnout today, and attention to the audience, and thanks for coming.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.